This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in a review. I'm making this video on New Year's Eve, so it will be the last video from ScreenFiles for 2019. And what I'm looking at today is the second season of Netflix's Lost in Space. And I honestly think it ranks among one of the best reboots ever made. And that sounds a bit hyperbolic. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that it's the best movie, miniseries, whatever ever made. I'm not saying it's damn good, but I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that it's one of the best reboots ever made. Why is that? Because it takes into account what made the original Lost in Space so interesting, which is primarily the family dynamic. And it expands upon that in interesting and really fascinating ways. If you recall the 1998 movie Lost in Space, its problem, at least in my opinion, was that it was too much like the television series. It didn't give you enough growth. It was essentially a big budget Lost in Space episode. And the problem with that is that I enjoyed Lost in Space. Lost in Space was cheesy as hell, though. It wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but it was interesting. It was, for the time, pretty fascinating. But let's not claim for a moment that the original Lost in Space was that good, because it wasn't. As I mentioned, because of the times, and just because it really wasn't. It wasn't that great. With the new series, they address a lot of the things that made the original series not good. For instance, Penny, Maureen, the women in 1965's Lost in Space were there because women, to be totally honest. And the idea of the family was composed of a husband, a wife, and children. A traditional family dynamic, by the way. So that was Lost in Space. That was at the core of it. And women didn't do anything. I mean, the mother was present. I don't recall her doing much. I haven't seen it in quite a while, but I don't remember her doing all that much either. I remember Penny being even more useless, for that matter. So the recent reboot takes those family dynamics and changes them, keeping them related to the original, but changes them in really awesome ways. For instance, Maureen in the Netflix reboot is actually a pretty interesting character. She's dynamic, she's smart, she has to take charge, being that her husband wasn't there for a time. And he's, I believe he's in the special forces or something, and he goes on missions. So he's not always present. So she has to take charge. And what's really cool is that Penny, from the original series, was such a waste of space. She was there, but mainly, as women tended to be in the 1960s, as a figure in distress who had no real existence beyond the people, the men mainly, that she was with. While in the Netflix reboot, Penny is awesome. And it's almost like meta commentary on the original, because she complains how it seems that everyone else, Will is smart, the other sister, whose name eludes me, is very athletic and determined, and she's just nothing. But that's the thing, she's actually really clever, and it comes out in fascinating ways. It's just great. Another thing is Dr. Smith. Parker Posey brings a shrewdness, a manipulativeness, and a vulnerability all at the same time, sometimes in the same scene, to Dr. Smith. She's not corny. She's not cantankerous like Jonathan Harris's portrayal of the character, and Gary Oldman's to some extent as well. Just fascinating and multifaceted, and it really works. And even the father is nuanced. He's not quite as present as the father from the original series. But that's okay too, because again, it reflects changing family dynamics. but he is uncertain and he's unsure, and him and his wife argue, and it's very much a modern portrayal of a family. In any case, the Netflix version of Lost in Space takes everything that you want from the original, but changes it up, sometimes in minor ways, sometimes in huge ways. For instance, the robot in the reboot is not, well, it's kind of a techno-organic life form, more so than a robot per se. And it's really interesting because the character, he's becoming a character. When you first meet the robot, it's just this alien thing. And as the series moves on, it develops personality traits of its own. And it's not like a pet. And that's the way Will treated it initially. But that's beginning to change. The robot is taking initiative of its own. It's doing things that it feels it needs to do for its own motives, as opposed to just obeying this 12-year-old boy. It's only about 10 episodes, which again, perfect. It's the sweet spot. You don't need more episodes than that in any season. By way of example, Star Trek Discovery was something like 14 episodes in a season. Not a great reboot, and I've already went on and on about that in the last video, but it's getting better. But also, it's this idea that you don't need 12 episodes, you don't need 13 episodes, and you certainly don't need 14. Cut it off at 10, which forces you to do character development in such a way that it becomes more efficient. And Lost in Space just works. It reminds me somewhat of The Expanse, in the sense that the technology seems very real and logic-based, and it uses a lot of wire work, and it's done in a very convincing fashion. It's science fiction, but it's science fiction in a way I tend to like it. It's not science fiction in the sense of, let's say, Star Wars, where the technology defies any sort of logic and things just happen. I can enjoy that. But with Lost in Space, everything is based on a logic, and it sticks to that logic. So the spaceships, they're not warping at incredible speeds. The space station requires spinning to create artificial gravity. Little things like that go a long way to help me appreciate where this show is coming from. If you haven't seen Lost in Space, check it out. Season 2 premiered, I want to say 2 or 3 days ago on Netflix, and it's well worth your time. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Peace, and have a great new year.